Well, I did tell you summer was almost here, but even I didn't expect it this fast. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for the not-so-little mermaid, Summer Kiara. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers at how you utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 5-star servants. So if you're ready for an exciting beach getaway with Kiara, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell, so that you can catch all of these servant spotlights as they go up, and you can help out the channel. But for now, on to Kiara's stats. Kiara has a max HP of 15,336 and a max attack of 11,128. Compared to the other Moon Cancer servants, Kiara does have the second highest HP and second highest attack stats, which sounds better than it actually is because there are only 3 SSR Moon Cancers, so in reality, her stats are just average for her class. Outside of her class though, Summer Kiara does boast very high HP even for an SSR servant, although her attack is below average. When it comes to her command cards, Kiara has 3 hits on her quick card, 3 hits on her arch card, 4 hits on her buster, and 5 hits on her extra card. She has an NP gain rate of 0.6% and a star rate of 14.8%. Both Kiara's NP gain and star generating are fairly strong due to her high hit counts and her beneficial passives. Kiara's stats overall are well-rounded, but with very heavy emphasis on defense and survivability. Taking a look at her skills, Kiara's first skill is Mermaid's Flesh rank EX. This skill grants her Guts 1 time, lasting for 5 turns, and reviving her with between 2,000 and 4,000 HP. It'll also recover her HP every turn for 3 turns, between 1,000 and 2,000, both depending on level. In addition, this skill will remove all of Kiara's debuffs, increase her NP damage by 20% for 3 turns, and will grant her a stack of Mermaid's Nourishment every turn for 4 turns. More on that later. Her second skill is Supernatural Power Inc. rank B. This skill charges her own NP gauge between 20 and 30% and generates between 10 and 20 crit stars, both depending on level. However, if it's upgraded by 1 stack of Mermaid's Flesh, it will instead increase her NP gauge between 30 and 40% and generate between 15 and 25 stars, both depending on level. And through 2 stacks of Mermaid's Nourishment, it will further increase her NP gauge between 30 and 50% and generate between 20 and 30 stars, again, both depending on level. And finally, Kiara's last skill is Clam Palace rank A. This skill grants the party evasion for 1 attack, lasting for 3 turns. It removes Sure Hit from all enemies. It inflicts the Bewitchment debuff on enemies for 3 turns, which reduces their critical attack chance by 10%. It reduces their arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns, and it reduces their defense for 3 turns between 10 and 20% depending on level. And just like with the previous skill, this skill can also be upgraded through Mermaid's Nourishment. If it's upgraded with 1 stack of Mermaid's Nourishment, it will inflict 2 stacks of Bewitchment on the enemies, reduce their arch card resistance by 25%, and decrease their defense between 15 and 25%. If it's upgraded with 2 stacks of Mermaid's Nourishment, it will reduce their arch card resistance by 30%, decrease their defense between 20 and 30%, and inflict 3 stacks of Bewitchment. As for her passives, Kiara has Territory Creation rank EX, which increases her arch card effectiveness by 12%, Spiritual World Creation rank EX, which increases her NP damage by 12%, Independent Manifestation rank E, which increases her crit damage by 2%, her mental debuff resistance by 2%, and her instant kill resistance by 2%, and Logos Eater rank D, which increases her defense against humanoid enemies by 14%. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Kiara has an Arts Buster deck with Quick Arts Buster Buster and an Arts Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Nirmanarati Heaven's Foam. It's an AoE arts attack that deals damage to all enemies with between a 450 and 750% damage modifier depending on level. It'll also deal an additional 20% damage to all enemies for each mental debuff they have, stacking up to 10 times, and it has between a 100 and 150% chance to instant kill them depending on overcharge. Being a Moon Cancer, Summer Kiara has very unique Ascension mat requirements, but thankfully they aren't that difficult to farm. For level Ascension, she just needs pieces and monuments for the Assassin and Rider classes, while for skill leveling, she is going to need Assassin and Rider skill gems, along with 8 seashells, 5 bloodstone tears, 9 mirrors, and 12 fruits of longevity per skill. Seashells are farmable at the Observatory in Babylonia, where they have a 46% drop rate. Bloodstone tears have a 19% drop rate at Shinjuku 2 Chome in Shinjuku. Mirrors drop at the Rear Mountain in Shimosa with a 12% drop rate, and fruits have a drop rate of 23% at Altar Town in Olympus. To say Summer Kiara is a complex servant would be an understatement. As you could probably tell from when I was reading her skills, Kiara has one of the most loaded skill sets of any servant ever created, which is interesting because stat-wise, she's pretty run-of-the-mill. Kiara has substantially high HP, which does give her good survivability, but it comes at the cost of her low attack, which is made even worse by the fact that her class has no real class advantage or any damage modifiers to take advantage of. Thankfully, she does have some decent start generating and strong NP gain, due in large part to her incredible territory creation EX passive. Her other passive, Spiritual World Creation, also helps add a bit more meat onto her NP as well to make up for her low attack. But enough about stats and passives, let's talk about those juicy skills. Kiara's entire skill set revolves around a central gimmick, stacking Mermaid's Nourishment. Mermaid's Nourishment is a unique buff for Summer Kiara that is granted by her first skill, Mermaid's Flesh. This skill gives Kiara Guts, debuff Cleanse, HP regeneration, a buff to her NP damage, and of course the aforementioned Mermaid's Nourishment buff. From a survivability standpoint, this skill is incredibly powerful. It provides Kiara with all the utility needed to survive any situation, a 6000 HP heal to deal with annoying chip damage and give her sustainability in stall fights, a hard defensive skill so that she can survive against most enemy NPs and heal back up, and debuff clearing for challenge quests. Offensively, the Noble Phantasm damage up isn't bad either, especially because it lasts for a full 3 turns, which makes it ideal for 3-turn farming setups with Castoria. But by far and away the most important part of the skill is Mermaid's Nourishment. This special buff will stack on Kiara one time every turn for 4 turns, and it's used to power up her other 2 skills. For example, Kiara's second skill, Supernatural Power, at base rank gives her a 30% NP battery and 20 crit stars. But if you activate this skill with 1 stack of Mermaid's Nourishment, then the stack will be consumed and this skill will be upgraded to a 40% NP charge and it'll drop 25 crit stars. If you have 2 Mermaid's Nourishment buffs, then it'll upgrade to a further 50% NP battery and 30 crit stars. Naturally, you're going to want to almost always save this skill for when you have 2 stacks, because of that 50% NP charge, which is tremendously useful for farming. And finally, Kiara's last skill, Clan Palace, gives the party evasion for 1 attack, removes sure hit from enemies, and debuffs enemies with a 20% arts down and defense down, as well as the Bewitchment debuff. With 1 stack of Mermaid's Nourishment, the debuffs are increased to 25% and 2 stacks of Bewitchment, and at 2 stacks, this skill lowers enemy defense and arch resist by 30% and inflicts 3 stacks of Bewitchment. This is an excellent skill for softening up enemies and pumping up Kiara's damage. Provided that both debuffs land, Kiara's Noble Phantasm will be significantly buffed, but in addition to those debuffs, Bewitchment also acts as a buff to Kiara's NP, buffing the damage by 20% for each stack. So this skill has the power to really juice up Kiara's damage numbers significantly if used at max power. However, for the most part, you're going to want to use this Mermaid's Nourishment stacks to power up her NP charge like I mentioned earlier, so you'll rarely ever get to use the skill at full power. Also, I should mention that the evasion is very good. It gives party-wide protection, which is perfect for stall teams in challenge quests. Summer Kiara's skills may be complex, but her skill leveling order is simple. NP charge first because of how crucial it is for farming, followed by Clan Palace for the extra damage, and then Mermaid's Flesh last since it doesn't really scale that well. For her pen skills, you pretty much just need mana loading since it'll help Kiara with her farming. Kiara's NP is an AoE arts attack that deals extra damage for each mental debuff on the enemy, and it has a chance to instant kill them. Funny enough, the instant kill triggers after the damage, so it won't affect Kiara's NP refund and farming consistency, like how it does with servants like Ares. So 99% of the time it doesn't even matter. What does matter though is that bonus damage from mental debuffs. Kiara herself has ways of inflicting a good amount of debuffs, and it makes servants with strong charm skills like Shuten a very good match with her. Summer Kiara's bread and butter is no doubt her fantastic synergy with Castoria for 3-turn farming. She's an AoE arch servant with a 50% NP charge battery and excellent NP gain, so suffice it to say that she can loop her NP multiple times against almost anything. The Space Ishtar comparisons aren't exactly that far off. Hell, even with one Castoria from a friend, Kiara can still loop effectively with supports like Waver, Rhaenys, Nero Bride, and Paracelsus, which makes her a very practical and effective farmer for any player. But Summer Kiara isn't just another farmer either. She also has a plethora of uses on stall teams, and she can tackle pretty much any type of content. She has a perfect skill set for tackling challenge quests and boss fights, powerful debuffs for supporting the team's DPS, and she's tanky as hell. She can survive forever thanks to her guts, heal, evasion, and debuff removal. She's a plug-and-play servant that you can squeeze into almost any team in almost any situation and still come out on top. Do you need someone who can cleave through mobs so you can advance through story? Kiara can do that with minimal support. Do you need a semi-support for your art stall team? Kiara can do that. Do you need a 3-turn farmer to grind lotto boxes? Kiara. Struggling with a boss fight in the newest Lost Belt? Have you heard about Kiara? Praises aside though, while Summer Kiara is equipped to perform well in any situation, there are a few glaring weaknesses that she does suffer from. Firstly, and most evidently, is her complexity. Summer Kiara is hard to use. She has a steep learning curve due to the way her skills interact with each other and how she needs to be set up in advance. To use Kiara effectively, you need to plan multiple turns ahead, one misclick or mistimed skill, and your Kiara is done for. In strategy game terms, every other servant in FGO is Civilization, but Kiara is Age of Empires. Also, because she needs to wait for Mermaid's nourishment stacks, Kiara is very slow. It takes her 2 to 4 turns to do what other servants can do on turn 1. But perhaps an even bigger weakness for Kiara is her lack of damage output. As a Moon Cancer with such low attack, Summer Kiara's Noble Phantasm barely even tickles enemies unless she's able to get off a full power Clam Palace, which, as I mentioned earlier, is hard to do when farming since you want to use those stacks for her NP charge instead. Without those debuffs, Kiara's damage is below subpar unless you have her at NP 2 or higher, or you're willing to use Plug Suit. Which brings me to my other point: because her damage is so heavily tied to her debuffs, it makes her completely ineffective when she's unable to land them, either because they just miss or because the enemy has high magic resistance or debuff immunity, which is fairly common, and that just makes her farming consistency not quite as strong as Space Ishtar's. When it comes to team comp, as I mentioned, Summer Kiara works best with Castoria in farming setups. But in addition to Castoria, other servants with good NP batteries like Nero Bride, Rhaenys, and Paracelsus are all excellent choices. Paracelsus is the go-to free-to-play support for arts farmers due to his powerful NP gain buffs, while Nero and Rhaenys provide excellent direct NP charge. In challenge quests though, you'll want to pair Kiara with servants who can bolster her attack while also helping keep her alive, like Mosh, Tamamo, or Jean. Mosh's defensive buffs pair very well with Kiara's auto heal to mitigate almost all chip damage, while Jean and Tamamo can provide additional healing, cooldown reduction, and debuffs. Summer Kiara's Bond CE is palm-top multi-story building. It grants her a one-time Guts that fully restores her HP, but it decreases the max HP of all allies by 1000. This is actually a useful Bond CE, especially if you want to use Kiara for soloing or other niche situations. But for farming, you're going to want to give her a CE that grants starting NP charge, like Kaleidoscope, Dive to Blue, or Painting Summer, all of which will help her out with her consistency when NP looping. For more damage though, I would recommend CEs that bolster Archcard effectiveness and NP damage, like Black Grail, Formal Craft, and Royal Icing, which can be helpful in boss fights or for extra damage when farming tougher nodes. In the future, pick up Ocean Flyer. It's a better version of Dive to Blue that gives pure attack stats, so it's perfect for arch loopers. As for command codes, healing codes like Good Wife Wise Fox and Maiden of Orleans can be useful for stall builds, solos, and just being a fun Mimi healer who never dies. Overall, Summer Kiara is very difficult to assess. On one hand, she is capable of performing nearly any role at a very high level. She is one of FGO's best farmers thanks to her strong NP gain and massive 50% NP battery. She has unbelievable amounts of utility for both supporting the team and taking on tough content, and she's just incredibly sturdy and can fit onto most teams to perform any role. But on the other hand, she has a slow and hard playstyle to master, and that makes her a little bit impractical to use. And her low damage and over-reliance on debuffs does hurt her consistency when farming unless you have her at a high NP level. So Summer Kiara gets an A from me. To be honest though, she's kind of impossible to grade because you get back whatever you put into her, and if you're good at micromanaging and have her at NP2 or NP3, then she can easily be an A+ or even an S tier servant. It all really just comes down to that NP damage and difficulty of use. So if those things aren't a problem to you, then Summer Kiara can be one of the best servants in all of FGO. But for most players, I do think she's way too awkward and slow to be used effectively in most situations. To make an analogy, since I know the question will come up for farming, if Space Ishtar, Summer Musashi, and Summer Kiara are all cars, and Castoria was the driver, they'd all be able to take you from A to B. But Space Ishtar and Musashi would go in a straight, easy line, whereas Kiara would take you from A to C to E to D before finally getting you to B. But hey, at least she'll look sexy as hell doing it. And those are my thoughts on Summer Kiara. She's an excellent servant if you're willing to put in the resources and effort into using her, but by no means is she a must roll unless you really like her. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over in our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter, and I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.